in the vast stillness of the Milky Way, where stars shimmer like distant whispers, a faint, rhythmic pulse echoes from the far reaches of an unknown star system. For astronomer Lyra Solara, this signal is more than just a scientific curiosity. It's a call she cannot ignore. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, she gathers a small crew and boards the starship Aetheris, leaving behind the familiar comforts of Earth for the uncharted void of space. The signal hints at something ancient, something profound, but the journey ahead is fraught with danger. As the crew prepares for their first leap into hyperspace, they know this adventure will not only challenge their courage, but also unravel mysteries that could change their understanding of the universe forever. This is the story of their voyage into the hidden realms of the Milky Way, a tale of discovery, danger, and the unyielding human spirit. The Aetheris shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its sleek hull bathed in the kaleidoscopic glow of a nearby nebula. Swirling hues of violet, gold, and deep blue danced across the viewport, as though the cosmos itself were painting a masterpiece just for them. Lyra stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the shifting colors, while Kale, ever the practical engineer, immediately began running diagnostics. Zainara, the crew's linguist and resident puzzle solver, leaned over the console, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she searched for the faint energy trail they had detected. The signal was faint but unmistakable, a thread of light weaving through the nebula's radiant chaos. It led them toward a hidden planet, its surface cloaked by the nebula's luminous embrace. The closer they approached, the stranger the readings became. The ship's systems began to falter, flickering in and out as though resisting the planet's pull. Kale's brow furrowed as he worked to stabilize the engines, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "We're losing control," he warned. "If we go any further, we might not be able to pull back." Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "We didn't come this far to turn back now," she said, her voice calm but resolute. Kale hesitated for only a moment before nodding, his trust in her unwavering. With a few deft adjustments, he rerouted power to the thrusters, sacrificing some of the ship's safety protocols in the process. It was a gamble, but one he was willing to take. As the Aetheris descended through the planet's atmosphere, the crew's unease deepened. The surface below was unlike anything they'd ever seen, a sprawling labyrinth of crystalline structures, their facets refracting light into a mesmerizing symphony of colors. Each structure pulsed faintly, as though alive, and the air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Zainara's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. "This isn't just a planet," she murmured. "It's something else, something deliberate." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their discovery settling over them like a shadow. What had they stumbled upon, and more importantly, what, or who, had drawn them here? As the Aetheris touched down on the crystalline surface, the hum grew louder, resonating through the ship's hull and into their very bones. Whatever awaited them on this strange world, one thing was certain: their journey into the unknown had only just begun. The air outside the Aetheris crackled with an almost tangible energy as the crew stepped onto the crystalline surface. Each step sent faint ripples through the ground, as though the planet itself were alive and aware of their presence. Zainara crouched down, her fingers brushing against the intricate glyphs, etched into the shimmering structures. The symbols pulsed faintly, reacting to her touch, and she quickly pulled out her portable scanner, her eyes widening as the device began translating fragments of the ancient script. "This isn't random," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "These glyphs, they are a message, a warning maybe. It's like they are telling a story, one about a civilization that existed long before humanity even dreamed of the stars." Lyra's curiosity burned brighter than ever. She adjusted the settings on her environmental suit, her gaze sweeping over the towering crystal formations that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. "We need to see more," she said, her voice firm but tinged with excitement. "If there's a chance to uncover the secrets of this place, we can't stop now." Kale, however, was less convinced. He held up his scanner, the screen flickering with erratic energy readings. "The closer we get to those structures, the more unstable everything becomes," he warned. "We're dealing with forces we don't fully understand. One wrong move, and we could trigger something we can't control." But Lyra was already moving, her determination outweighing the risks. The crew followed reluctantly, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The deeper they ventured, the more the glyphs seemed to converge, forming patterns that told a story of creation, destruction, and rebirth. Zainara's scanner struggled to keep up, its translations becoming fragmented, but no less fascinating. "It's like they are describing the birth of the Milky Way itself," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shuddered violently, sending cracks webbing across the crystalline surface. A deafening roar filled the air as a massive spire of crystal erupted from the ground, its facets glowing with a blinding, otherworldly light. The crew scrambled for cover, but the light enveloped them, disorienting and separating them in an instant. When the light faded, Lyra found herself alone in a cavernous chamber, the walls lined with more of the glowing glyphs. Before her, a holographic figure materialized, its form shifting and shimmering like liquid light. Its voice was calm yet enigmatic, speaking in riddles that seemed to echo through time itself. "You seek answers," it said, "but the truth is a tapestry woven from threads of creation and chaos. To understand the galaxy, you must first understand what was lost." Lyra's heart raced as she listened, the weight of the entity's words settling over her. What had they stumbled upon, and how was this ancient civilization connected to the very fabric of the Milky Way? The answers, she realized, were closer than she thought, but so were the dangers. The crew's journey into the unknown had taken a turn none of them could have anticipated, and the mysteries of this strange world were only beginning to unravel. The holographic figure before Lyra shimmered, its form shifting like starlight caught in a prism. Its voice, ancient and resonant, filled the chamber with words that seemed to transcend time. "We are the Celestials," it said, each syllable carrying the weight of eons. "Once we wove the threads of creation, shaping the very fabric of the galaxy. But our time has passed, and our legacy now hangs in the balance." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Celestials, a name she had only encountered in fragmented myths and ancient star charts. She had always dismissed them as legends, stories spun from the imaginations of early stargazers. But here, standing before a living remnant of their civilization. The truth was undeniable. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked, her voice trembling with both awe and urgency. The figure's gaze seemed to pierce through her, as though it could see the very essence of her being. "The signal you followed was a call for aid," it replied. "A darkness stirs at the edge of the galaxy, one that seeks to unravel all we have built. Our power wanes, but you carry the spark of what we once were. You must help us preserve what remains." Lyra's mind raced, questions swirling like stars in a nebula. What could she, a mere mortal, do against a force capable of threatening the Celestials themselves? Yet the entity's words ignited a fire within her, a sense of purpose that burned brighter than her doubts. Meanwhile, Kale and Zainara found themselves in a labyrinth of shifting crystals, their path twisting and turning with no clear end in sight. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic glow, as though the planet itself were alive and watching. Kale's frustration grew with every step, his scanner useless in the face of the planet's erratic energy. "This place doesn't make sense," he muttered, his voice tight with irritation. "It's like it's playing games with us." Zainara, however, moved with a strange calm, her fingers brushing against the crystalline walls as though listening to a silent melody. Her eyes glazed over as fragmented images flooded her mind, visions of stars being born, civilizations rising and falling, and a race of beings whose power rivaled that of gods. "It's not just a maze," she murmured, her voice distant. "It's alive. It responds to us, to our thoughts, our emotions." Kale stopped in his tracks, his frustration giving way to unease. "What are you talking about?" Before Zainara could answer, the ground beneath them shifted, the crystals rearranging themselves into a new configuration. The air grew thick with tension, and Kale realized with a start that his anger and fear seemed to fuel the planet's erratic behavior. "It's feeding off us," he said, his voice low. "Our emotions, they are making this worse." Zainara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We need to stay calm, focus. The planet, or whatever's controlling it, is testing us. Maybe even teaching us." Kale clenched his fists, struggling to rein in his emotions. The mission had always been about discovery, about pushing the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. But now, faced with forces beyond his understanding, he felt small, insignificant. Doubts he had buried deep within began to surface, gnawing at his resolve. Could they truly succeed where even the Celestials had faltered? Zainara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "We'll find a way," she said softly. "But we have to trust this place, trust ourselves." As they pressed on, Zainara's connection to the Celestials deepened. The fragmented memories grew clearer, painting a picture of a civilization that had once thrived on unity and harmony. She began to understand that the maze wasn't just a test. It was a key, a way for them to unlock the knowledge they needed to face the darkness the entity had warned Lyra about. Back in the chamber, Lyra listened intently as the holographic figure shared more of the Celestial story. Their fall had not been sudden but gradual, a slow unraveling caused by their own hubris and the rise of a malevolent force they called the Voidborn. "We sealed it away," the entity said, "but the seal weakens. If it breaks, the galaxy will fall into chaos." Lyra's resolve hardened. The weight of the task before her was immense, but she knew she couldn't turn away. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice steady. The figure's form flickered, its light dimming as though drained by the effort of speaking. "Find the heart of the Celestials," it said. "It is the source of our power, the key to restoring the seal. But beware, the Voidborn will do everything in its power to stop you." As the figure faded, Lyra felt a surge of determination. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but she knew she wasn't alone. Somewhere in the maze, Kale and Zainara were fighting their own battles, each step bringing them closer to the truth and to each other. The fate of the galaxy now rested in their hands, and the journey into the heart of the unknown had only just begun. Lyra stood in silence, the holographic entity's words echoing in her mind. The heart of the Celestials, a relic of unimaginable power, was their only hope to restore the seal and protect the galaxy from the Voidborn. But to find it, they would need to navigate a world that seemed intent on testing their every limit. She glanced down at the shard of crystal in her hand, its surface pulsing with a faint, otherworldly light. The entity had called it a gift, a fragment of the Celestial's power, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that it came with a price. "I accept the task," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her decision. "But I need to know, what happens if we fail?" The entity's form flickered, its light dimming as though burdened by the question. "If the Voidborn escapes its prison, it will consume everything: stars, planets, life itself. Your world, Earth, will be among the first to fall." Lyra's chest tightened at the thought. Earth, her home, her people, was already facing threats she couldn't fully comprehend. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. She clenched the shard tighter, its energy humming faintly against her palm. "And this shard, what is it?" "A tool," the entity replied. "A fragment of our power, capable of bending the threads of space and time. Use it wisely, for its energy is finite. But be warned, each use will hasten the decay of this world. The planet's life force is tied to the shard, and as it weakens, so too does the stability of this place." Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. She had no choice but to press forward, no matter the risks. With the shard in hand, she turned and began her search for Kale and Zainara, her footsteps echoing through the labyrinthine corridors. Meanwhile, the planet itself seemed to react to the shard's presence. The crystalline walls pulsed erratically, their light flickering like a dying star. The ground beneath Lyra's feet trembled, and in the distance, she heard the unmistakable sound of shattering crystal. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding as the air grew thick with tension. When she finally found Kale and Zainara, they were standing at the edge of a vast chasm, its depths glowing with an eerie, golden light. The ground around them was littered with fragments of shattered crystal, and the air buzzed with static. Kale turned as Lyra approached, his expression a mix of relief and frustration. "What's going on?" he demanded. "This place is falling apart." Lyra held up the shard, its light casting strange patterns across their faces. "I made a deal with the Celestials," she explained quickly. "This shard can help us find the heart, but using it comes at a cost. The planet's decaying faster now, and we don't have much time." Zainara's eyes widened as she studied the shard, her fingers brushing against its surface. "It's alive," she murmured, "like the rest of this place. But it's unstable. If we use it, we risk accelerating the collapse. Kale crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. So, what's the plan? Do we cut our losses and get out of here while we still can? Or do we stay and risk getting buried under a mountain of crystal? Lyra hesitated, her gaze shifting between her two companions. The decision weighed heavily on her, but deep down, she knew there was only one path forward. "We can't leave," she said finally. "Not yet. If the Voidborn escapes, it won't just destroy this world. It'll destroy everything. We have to find the heart and restore the seal." "It's the only way," Kale sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're asking a lot, Lyra, but if you're in, I'm in." Zainara nodded, her expression determined. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." As if in response to their decision, the ground beneath them shuddered violently, a deep crack splitting the surface and spreading rapidly. The air filled with the sound of shattering crystal, and the light of the chasm flared bright, as though the planet itself were crying out in warning. Lyra tightened her grip on the shard, its light intensifying as though sensing her resolve. "We move fast," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay close and trust each other. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for the galaxy." The crew exchanged grim nods, their bond stronger than ever. Together, they stepped into the unknown, the shard's light guiding their way as the world around them crumbled. The secrets of the Celestials were within reach, but so were the dangers. And with every passing moment, the line between salvation and destruction grew thinner. The creaking of the crystalline walls grew louder as the crew pressed forward, the shard in Lyra's hand casting an eerie glow against the jagged surfaces. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like the atmosphere of a dying star. Despite the growing instability of the planet, Lyra's determination never wavered. She led the way with unwavering focus, her eyes scanning the shifting corridors for any sign of the heart. Kale, however, lagged behind, his skepticism bubbling to the surface. "This is madness," he muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "Every time we use that shard, this place gets worse. What if we're not saving the galaxy? What if we're just speeding up its destruction?" Lyra paused, turning to face him. Her expression was calm but firm. "I know the risks," she said, "but if we don't act, the Voidborn will destroy everything." "The Celestials entrusted us with this task for a reason. We can't give up now." Before Kale could respond, Zainara let out a soft gasp, her eyes fixed on a section of the wall that had begun to pulse with a rhythmic light. "Look," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "There's something here." The crew gathered around as the wall split open, revealing a hidden chamber bathed in a soft, golden glow. Inside, a massive star map stretched across the ceiling, its surface alive with swirling constellations and glowing pathways. Zainara stepped forward, her fingers tracing the lines of light, as though she were reading a story written in the stars. This is a map of celestial outposts," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They're scattered across the galaxy, each one holding a piece of their legacy." Lyra's heart raced as she studied the map. If they could reach these outposts, they might uncover more of the Celestials' secrets, perhaps even the tools they needed to stop the Voidborn. But Kale's unease only deepened. And how do we know these outposts aren't just as unstable as this place? He asked, his tone sharp. What if we're walking into more traps? Zainara turned to him, her expression softening. I think I can help with that, she said. The more I connect with this place, the more I remember. Bits of their language, their history. It's like I've known it all along. Kale narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? That you're one of them? Not exactly, Zainara replied, her voice distant. But I think I might be descended from them, or maybe I've inherited something from their race. I can't explain it, but I feel it. This map, this language, it's familiar to me in a way I can't ignore. The revelation hung in the air, adding another layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. Lyra placed a hand on Zainara's shoulder, her touch reassuring. If you can help us navigate this, we'll have a better chance of finding the heart. But we need to work together, all of us. Kale crossed his arms, his expression conflicted. I want to believe in this as much as you do, he said, his voice quieter now. But every step we take feels like we're playing with fire. I don't want to see us get burned. The tension between them was palpable, a silent rift threatening to divide the group. Lyra knew that without unity, their mission would fail. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady as she looked at both of her companions. We're in this together, she said. No matter what happens, we trust each other. That's the only way we'll make it through. The chamber around them seemed to hum in agreement, the star map's light flickering, as though responding to her words. But the sound of cracking crystal echoed from the corridors beyond, a grim reminder that time was running out. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their choices hanging heavy in the air. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Zainara hesitated, her eyes lingering on the map. There's something else, she said. A name, a place. It's faint, but I think it's important. The Celestials called it the Nexus. If we can find it, it might hold the key to everything. Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. Then that's where we go next. But we'll need to move quickly. This world won't hold much longer. With the star map's secrets etched into their minds, the crew stepped back into the labyrinth, the shard's light guiding their way. The path ahead was uncertain, their unity fragile, but one thing was clear. The fate of the galaxy rested on their ability to trust not just the Celestials, but each other. And in the heart of the unknown, that trust would be their greatest strength, or their ultimate downfall. The chamber trembled violently, cracks spider webbing across the crystalline walls as the planet's collapse intensified. The star map above them flickered, its constellations dimming as the energy sustaining them drained away. Zainara's hands moved swiftly over the glyphs, etched into the chamber's central console, her brow furrowed with concentration. There's a portal here, she said, her voice urgent but steady. But it's dormant. We need to activate it now. Lyra's gaze darted to the shard in her hand, its light flickering faintly. Can this help? She asked, holding it out. Zainara shook her head. The shard's energy isn't enough. We need a massive surge, something powerful enough to jumpstart the portal. Kale's jaw tightened as he pieced together what she was suggesting. You're talking about the Aetheris' power core, he said, his voice low. Rerouting it could fry the ship's systems, or worse, leave us stranded. Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice firm but empathetic. "We don't have a choice. If we stay here, we'll be buried under tons of crystal. This is our only way out." Kale hesitated, his mind racing through the risks. The Aetheris was more than a ship. It was their lifeline, their only connection to the world they knew. But the ground beneath them shuddered again, a deafening crack echoing through the chamber as a massive spire of crystal collapsed nearby. Time was running out. With a grim nod, Kale pulled out his communicator, his fingers flying across the interface as he began rerouting the ship's power. "This had better work," he muttered, his voice tinged with both frustration and determination. The Aetheris responded with a groan, its systems straining under the sudden surge of energy. The portal before them began to hum, its edges shimmering with a faint, golden light. Zainara's eyes lit up as she adjusted the console, her connection to the Celestials guiding her hands. "It's working," she exclaimed, but the planet had other plans. The ground beneath them split open, a deep chasm forming as the core began to implode. The air filled with the sound of shattering crystal, the walls collapsing inward as the chamber's light dimmed. "Go," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The crew sprinted toward the portal, the ground crumbling beneath their feet. Kale hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the chamber as though searching for another way, but Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. As they leaped through the portal, the world behind them dissolved into a storm of light and debris. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, a vast, empty void that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Then, with a sudden jolt, they tumbled onto a smooth, metallic surface, the portal snapping shut behind them. The crew lay there for a moment, catching their breath as the reality of their situation sank in. They were no longer on the Crystalline planet, or anywhere familiar, for that matter. Around them stretched an endless expanse of stars, their light cold and distant. The Aetheris floated nearby, its systems flickering faintly as it struggled to stabilize. Kale was the first to speak, his voice a mix of relief and frustration. "Well, we're alive, but where the hell are we?" Zainara sat up slowly, her eyes scanning the strange surroundings. "Somewhere beyond the known galaxy," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "The portal didn't just take us to another world, it brought us to a completely different region of space." Lyra's heart raced as she processed the implications. They were farther from home than anyone had ever been, adrift in a region of the cosmos that defied all known maps and charts. The Celestials' legacy had brought them here, but what awaited them in this uncharted expanse was anyone's guess. As the crew regrouped, their determination to uncover the heart of the Celestials burned brighter than ever. The journey had pushed them to their limits, but they knew one thing for certain: the galaxy's fate still rested in their hands. And no matter how far they traveled, they would face whatever came next together. The crew floated in the vast, star-filled void, the silence of space enveloping them like a blanket. The Aetheris drifted aimlessly, its systems flickering weakly as it struggled to recover from the energy surge that had propelled them through the portal. Lyra clutched the crystal shard tightly, its once bright glow now dim and erratic. She moved quickly, attaching the shard to the ship's console in a desperate attempt to stabilize their systems. The shard pulsed faintly, its energy barely enough to keep the ship operational. "We're running on borrowed time," Kale muttered, his eyes fixed on the flickering readouts. "That shard's almost out of juice, and we're light years from anywhere familiar. What's the plan, Lyra?" Before she could answer, a low, resonant hum filled the ship, vibrating through the hull and into their very bones. The crew froze, their eyes drawn to the viewport as a massive, luminous star materialized in the distance. Its light was unlike anything they had ever seen, a soft, golden glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the hum. Zainara's breath caught in her throat. "It's alive," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's not just a star, it's sentient." The hum grew louder, coalescing into a series of harmonic vibrations that resonated deep within them. To their astonishment, the vibrations formed words, their meaning clear despite the absence of sound. "You are not meant to be here," the star's voice echoed, its tone both serene and authoritative. "This is a place of stillness, a sanctuary for the Celestials' legacy, yet you carry their mark." Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding. "We were sent by the Celestials," she said, her voice steady. "They gave us this shard and tasked us with finding the heart. The galaxy is in danger. A darkness called the Voidborn threatens to destroy everything." The star's light flickered, its vibrations shifting to a darker, more urgent tone. "The Voidborn," it repeated, the name reverberating with a sense of dread. "It is a force older than time, born from the chaos that exists between creation and destruction. The Celestials once sealed it away, but the seal weakens. If it escapes, the galaxy will fall into eternal night." The weight of the star's words settled over the crew like a shadow. Kale crossed his arms, his skepticism battling with the undeniable reality before them. "So, what do we do? We're just a handful of explorers. How are we supposed to stop something that even the Celestials couldn't destroy?" The star's light softened, its vibrations calming. "You carry more than the shard," it said. "You carry the spark of their legacy, a spark that can reignite their power, but the path ahead is fraught with peril. The Voidborn will seek to corrupt you, to turn your fear and doubt against you. To succeed, you must embrace unity and trust in one another." Lyra's mind raced as she processed the star's warning. The mission had always been about discovery, about pushing the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. But now, the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She glanced at her companions, their faces reflecting the same mix of determination and uncertainty she felt. "We need to decide," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Do we continue, knowing the risks, or do we return to Earth with the knowledge we've gained and let others take up the fight?" Kale's jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm not gonna lie, this scares the hell out of me, but if we walk away now, we're just passing the buck. Someone has to face this, and it might as well be us." Zainara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The Celestials chose us for a reason. Maybe it's not just about what we can do, it's about what we're willing to risk. If there's even a chance we can stop the Voidborn, we have to try." The star's light flared brightly, its vibrations resonating with approval. "You carry the courage of the Celestials within you," it said. "But know this, the journey will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. The heart lies beyond the nexus, a place where time and space converge. To reach it, you must first find the key hidden within yourselves. With those final words, the star's light began to dim, its form dissolving into the void. The crew stood in silence, the weight of their decision settling over them. The path ahead was uncertain, the dangers greater than they had ever faced. But one thing was clear: they were no longer just explorers, they were guardians of a legacy that spanned the galaxy. As the Aetheris' systems stabilized, Lyra took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. The shard's light flickered faintly, a reminder of the fragile thread connecting them to the Celestials. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, united by a purpose greater than themselves, and in the heart of the unknown, that unity would be their greatest strength. The Aetheris drifted closer to the celestial outpost, its jagged silhouette glowing faintly against the backdrop of endless stars. Lyra stood at the helm, her grip tightening on the console as she surveyed the ancient structure. It was unlike anything they had encountered before, a sprawling network of crystalline spires and metallic arches, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with a soft, golden light. The star's guidance had brought them here, but the sight of the outpost filled her with equal parts hope and trepidation. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of their mission. The Celestials left this place for a reason. If we can access their technology, we might have a chance to stop the Voidborn. Kale approached the console, his eyes scanning the readouts. "That's a big if," he muttered. "This place looks like it's been abandoned for millennia. Who knows if any of it still works?" Zainara, however, seemed undeterred. Her gaze was fixed on the outpost, her expression one of quiet determination. "It's not abandoned," she said softly. "It's waiting." The crew docked the Aetheris at the outpost's central hub, its doors hissing open to reveal a labyrinth of corridors bathed in the same golden light. The air was thick with an almost tangible energy, and the walls seemed to hum faintly, as though alive with the memories of the Celestials. As they ventured deeper, Zainara's connection to the outpost grew stronger. She moved with a strange confidence, her fingers brushing against the glyphs, etched into the walls as though reading a story only she could understand. "This way," she said, leading them to a massive chamber filled with towering machines and crystalline interfaces. Kale's eyes widened as he took in the sight. This is incredible," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "This tech is light years beyond anything we've ever seen." The crew wasted no time, Kale immediately diving into the task of integrating the outpost's advanced systems with the Aetheris. Zainara worked alongside him, her growing connection to the Celestials allowing her to interpret the outpost's technology in ways that defied logic. Together, they began repairing the ship, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of a deeper understanding. But as the repairs progressed, the outpost began to stir. The hum in the air grew louder, the walls pulsing with a rhythmic light that seemed almost defensive. Before the crew could react, the chamber's doors slammed shut, and the air filled with the crackling of energy. "We've triggered something," Kale said, his voice tense. "The outpost thinks we're intruders." The crew barely had time to process his words before the chamber erupted into chaos. Energy traps materialized from the walls, their arcs of light cutting through the air with deadly precision. The crew scrambled for cover, their movements frantic as they tried to avoid the traps. Lyra's mind raced as she assessed the situation. "We need to disable the defenses," she shouted over the noise. "Kale, can you find the control system?" "Working on it," he called back, his fingers flying across a crystalline interface. "But it's not responding to my commands. It's like it's rejecting me." Zainara stepped forward, her eyes closed as she focused on the outpost's energy. "Let me try," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. She placed her hands on the interface, her breathing steady as she attuned herself to the outpost's rhythm. The moment she made contact, the chamber seemed to shift. The energy traps slowed, their movements becoming less erratic. Kale watched in awe as Zainara's connection to the Celestials allowed her to communicate with the outpost in a way he never could. "It's working," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. With Zainara's guidance, the crew navigated the gauntlet of traps, each step requiring precise coordination. Kale's technical expertise proved invaluable, his quick thinking allowing them to bypass the most dangerous obstacles. But the experience took its toll, leaving them physically and emotionally drained. When the final trap deactivated, the chamber fell silent, the air thick with the weight of their exhaustion. Lyra sank to the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. We did it," she said, her voice trembling with relief. Kale nodded, his face pale but determined. "But at what cost?" he asked, his gaze falling on Zainara, who stood motionless, her hands still pressed against the interface. Zainara turned to them, her expression unreadable. "The outpost knows us now," she said softly, "but it's not just a repository of technology. It's a test, one we passed, but barely." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. The outpost had given them the tools they needed to continue their mission, but it had also revealed the true cost of their journey. The path ahead would demand more than just skill and determination. It would demand unity, trust, and a willingness to face the unknown, no matter the cost. As the Aetheris' systems began to hum with renewed strength, the crew prepared to leave the outpost, their bond stronger than ever. But the experience had left them changed, their resolve tempered by the knowledge that the galaxy's fate rested not just on their actions, but on their ability to rise above the challenges that lay ahead. The crew stepped into the heart of the outpost, their footsteps echoing through a vast, cavernous chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Towering shelves of crystalline data banks lined the walls, their surfaces shimmering with an intricate web of golden light. The air was thick with the hum of ancient technology, a constant reminder of the Celestials' advanced civilization. At the center of the chamber stood a massive holographic interface, its surface alive with swirling patterns of light and glyphs. Zainara approached the interface first, her fingers brushing against its surface, as though greeting an old friend. The moment she made contact, the chamber came alive. Images and symbols flickered across the walls, forming a tapestry of stories that spanned millennia. This is their history," she said, her voice filled with awe. "A record of their war against the Voidborn." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes scanning the holographic displays. The images depicted the Celestials as beings of immense power, their forms radiant and fluid, like living stars. But what caught her attention most were the depictions of the Voidborn, a shadowy, formless entity that seemed to consume everything in its path. The archive revealed how the Voidborn thrived on energy, drawn to sources of immense power like moths to a flame. Her heart sank as the realization hit her. "The shard," she said, holding up the crystal fragment. "It's not just a tool, it's a beacon. The Voidborn can sense its energy. Every time we've used it, we've been drawing it closer." Kale frowned, his arms crossed as he processed the information. "So, what you're saying is that we've been playing right into its hands this whole time?" "Not intentionally," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with guilt. "But yes, the Celestials sealed the Voidborn in a distant dimension, but the seal is weakening. And now, with the shard's energy, we might have sped up its return." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, the crew's silence broken only by the faint hum of the archive. Zainara reached out, her hand resting on Lyra's shoulder. "This isn't your fault," she said softly. "We didn't know, but now that we do, we can make a choice." "A choice?" Kale interjected, his tone sharp. "What choice? Destroy the shard and risk losing our only way to fight the Voidborn, or keep using it and risk letting it out of its prison? Either way, we're screwed." Lyra clenched her fists, her mind racing through the possibilities. Destroying the shard would cut off the Voidborn's access to its energy, but it would also leave them defenseless. Using it to strengthen the seal, however, could buy them time, but at what cost? The shard's energy might be enough to hold the Voidborn back, but it could also make the seal unstable, accelerating its collapse. "We need to think this through," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "The Celestials sacrificed themselves to create the seal. If we destroy the shard, we might be undoing their work. But if we use it, we could be playing with forces we don't fully understand." Zainara stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "There's another way," she said. "The archive mentions something called the Nexus, a place where the threads of creation and destruction converge. If we can reach it, we might be able to restore the seal without relying on the shard." Kale raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we find this nexus? Do we just ask the Voidborn for directions?" Zainara's lips curved into a faint smile. "The archive has coordinates," she replied, "but getting there won't be easy. The nexus is at the edge of known space, in a region so unstable that even the Celestials feared it." The crew fell silent once more, the enormity of their decision pressing down on them. Lyra's gaze shifted between her companions, her mind grappling with the weight of their choices. She knew that whatever they decided, the consequences would ripple across the galaxy. "We'll find the Nexus," she said at last, her voice resolute, "but we do it together. No more secrets, no more doubts. The Celestials trusted us with their legacy, and we're going to see this through, no matter what it takes." As the crew prepared to leave the archive, the holographic displays dimmed, their light fading into the shadows. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just travelers in the cosmos. They were guardians of a legacy, bound by a purpose greater than themselves. And in the heart of the unknown, that purpose would be their guiding light. The decision weighed heavily on the crew as they gathered in the Aetheris' command center. The shard, now dim and fragile, sat at the center of the console, its faint pulse a constant reminder of the power it held and the danger it posed. Lyra's voice broke the tense silence. "Reinforcing the seal is our only chance," she said, her tone steady but laced with urgency. "But it won't be easy. The edge of the galaxy is uncharted territory, and the Voidborn's influence is already spreading." Kale leaned against the console, his arms crossed as he studied the shard. "We're talking about flying into the unknown with a ship that's barely holding together," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "One wrong move, and we're not just risking the mission, we're risking our lives." Zainara, standing slightly apart, seemed lost in thought. Her connection to the Celestials had deepened since their time at the outpost, and the weight of their memories pressed on her like a second skin. "The Voidborn thrives on fear," she said softly, her gaze distant. "It will try to stop us, to break us. But if we can hold on to each other, we might just make it through." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. There was no turning back now. With a collective nod, they set their course for the edge of the galaxy, the shard's faint glow their only guide. As the Aetheris surged forward, the ship's systems began to falter almost immediately. Strange distortions rippled across the viewport, the stars outside twisting and warping, as though the fabric of space itself was unraveling. Kale worked tirelessly to stabilize the engines, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "We're losing power," he muttered, his voice tense. "The Voidborn's influence is corrupting the ship's systems." "I'm not sure how much longer we can hold it together." The distortions weren't limited to the ship. Time itself seemed to bend and twist, creating eerie loops that left the crew disoriented. One moment, they were preparing for a jump through hyperspace. The next, they found themselves back at the outpost, reliving moments they had already experienced. The repetition was maddening, each loop feeding their growing sense of unease. Zainara, however, seemed to weather the distortions better than the others. Her connection to the Celestials allowed her to sense the Voidborn's manipulations, but it came at a cost. As the loops continued, she began to lose herself in the flood of memories and emotions that weren't her own. "I can hear them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Their voices, their thoughts. It's like I'm becoming one of them." Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch grounding. "You're still you," she said firmly. "Focus on that. We need you, Zainara. Not just the Celestials, but the Voidborn's influence didn't stop at time loops." Spatial distortions began to warp the ship's interior, hallways stretching endlessly or collapsing in on themselves without warning. The crew found themselves navigating a labyrinth of shifting walls and impossible geometry, their progress slowed to a crawl. Worst of all were the hallucinations. Each member of the crew began to see things, shadows moving in the corners of their vision, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and visions of their deepest fears made manifest. For Kale, it was the ship falling apart around him, his inability to save it a reflection of his own insecurities. For Lyra, it was the faces of those she had left behind on Earth, their voices accusing her of abandoning them. Zainara, however, bore the brunt of the Voidborn's attacks. The Celestials' memories merged with her own, their collective consciousness overwhelming her sense of self. At times, she spoke in languages no one could understand, her words filled with sorrow and regret. Other times, she seemed to forget who she was entirely, her eyes distant and unfocused. Despite the chaos, the crew pressed on, their determination unwavering. Kale's technical expertise kept the ship functional, even as its systems groaned under the strain. Lyra's leadership held them together, her calm presence a beacon of stability in the face of mounting fear. And Zainara, though slipping further into the Celestial's consciousness, continued to guide them, her connection to the outpost providing crucial insights into the Voidborn's weaknesses. As they neared the edge of the galaxy, the distortions grew more intense, the Voidborn's influence reaching a fever pitch. The shard, now barely glowing, pulsed faintly in Lyra's hand, its energy nearly depleted. "We're close," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just a little further. The crew braced themselves for what lay ahead, their unity, their greatest strength. The Voidborn's attacks had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but they had endured. Now, with the seal within reach, they faced their greatest challenge yet, not just to save the galaxy, but to reclaim themselves from the shadows of fear and doubt that threatened to consume them. The Aetheris emerged from the turbulent warp of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the strain of the final jump. Before them stretched the edge of the galaxy, a place where the stars thinned into darkness and the fabric of space seemed to fray at the edges. Rising from the void was a massive structure, ancient and crumbling, its surface etched with the same intricate glyphs they had seen throughout their journey. This was the seal, the last barrier holding back the Voidborn, but it was far from intact. Cracks spider-webbed across its surface, and a deep, shadowy energy pulsed from within, as though the structure itself were alive and in pain. Lyra's breath caught as she took in the sight. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "The seal. If we don't stabilize it now, the Voidborn will break free." The moment the words left her mouth, the air around them shifted. A cold, oppressive presence filled the ship, its weight pressing down on them like a suffocating blanket. The crew's fears, once buried deep within, began to surface, taking shape as shadowy entities that clawed at the edges of their minds. Kale was the first to see his. A shadowy figure loomed before him, its form shifting into the image of the Aetheris, broken, lifeless, and drifting in the void. The vision struck at the core of his deepest fear, failure. His hands trembled as he tried to shake the image away, but it lingered, whispering doubts that threatened to paralyze him. Zainara, too, faced her own demons. The Celestial's memories, once a source of strength, now overwhelmed her. Their voices echoed in her mind, their sorrow and regret blending with her own, until she could no longer tell where she ended and they began. Her connection to them, once a beacon of guidance, now felt like a chain pulling her into the abyss. Lyra gripped the crystal shard tightly, its faint glow a fragile lifeline in the encroaching darkness. "I need to channel the shard's energy into the seal," she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "But it's going to take everything I've got. You two need to hold the line, keep the Voidborn's shadows at bay, while I work." Kale nodded, his jaw tightening as he pushed aside his doubts. "We've got your back," he said, his voice steady. "Just don't take too long." Zainara, though visibly shaken, stepped forward. "I'll help," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "But I'm not sure how much longer I can hold the Celestials' memories at bay. If I lose myself," Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch grounding. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly. "Stay with us, we need you." As Lyra began the process of channeling the shard's energy, the shadows closed in. Kale and Zainara stood side by side, their bond stronger than ever as they fought to protect her. Kale's technical expertise came into play as he rerouted the ship's systems to create barriers of light, forcing the shadows back. Zainara, drawing on the fragments of the Celestial's power still within her, summoned bursts of golden energy that disrupted the Voidborn's influence. But the fight was far from easy. The shadows were relentless, their forms shifting and twisting to exploit every fear and doubt. Kale's vision of the broken Aetheris returned, this time with the added torment of Lyra and Zainara's lifeless bodies drifting beside it. The image shook him to his core, but he pushed through, his determination to protect his crew outweighing his fear. Zainara, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her sense of self. The Celestials' voices grew louder, their memories threatening to consume her. She could feel the Voidborn's influence creeping in, its darkness weaving through her thoughts like a poison. But she held on, clinging to the bond she shared with Kale and Lyra. Lyra, at the center of it all, poured every ounce of her strength into the shard. Its energy surged through her, a searing pain that threatened to overwhelm her. The seal began to stabilize, its cracks sealing one by one, but the cost was high. Her vision blurred, her body trembling as the shard's power drained her life force. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The shadows surged forward, their forms coalescing into a massive, writhing mass of darkness. Kale and Zainara stood their ground, their combined efforts barely holding the line. But as the final crack in the seal began to close, Zainara faltered. The Celestial's memories overwhelmed her, and for a moment, she was lost. "Zainara." Kale shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The sound of his voice snapped her back to reality. With a final, desperate effort, she summoned a burst of golden energy that forced the shadows back, giving Lyra the time she needed to complete the process. The seal flared with brilliant light, its surface whole once more. The shadows dissolved into nothingness, the Voidborn's presence retreating into the void. But the victory came at a cost. Lyra collapsed, the shard falling from her hand as its light flickered and died. Kale and Zainara rushed to her side, their hearts pounding with fear. "Lyra," Zainara cried, her voice breaking. For a moment, there was silence. Then slowly, Lyra opened her eyes, her breath shallow but steady. "We did it," she whispered, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The crew knelt there, their bond stronger than ever, the weight of their journey settling over them. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the scars of their ordeal would remain. And as they looked out at the now stable seal, they knew one thing for certain: their journey was far from over. The galaxy still held mysteries, and the Voidborn's threat still loomed. But together, they would face whatever came next. The Aetheris drifted silently in the shadow of the reinforced seal, its once proud hull now battered and scarred from the ordeal. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with exhaustion and grief. Lyra lay on the floor of the command center, her chest rising and falling weakly as Kale knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he checked her vitals. The crystal shard, now nothing more than a pile of lifeless fragments, lay scattered nearby, its energy completely spent. "She's alive," Kale said, his voice hoarse with relief. "But barely. We need to get her to the med bay." As he lifted Lyra gently, Zainara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Her eyes, once filled with the fire of determination, now glowed with an otherworldly light. The Celestial's consciousness had fully merged with her, their memories and purpose now inseparable from her own. She moved with a quiet grace, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "The seal is stable," she said, her voice calm but tinged with sorrow. "For now, but it's only a temporary solution. The Voidborn's hunger is eternal. It will return, stronger than before, unless the galaxy unites to confront it." Lyra stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open. "Zainara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you saying?" Zainara knelt beside her, her hand brushing Lyra's cheek with a tenderness that spoke of the bond they had shared. "The Celestial's power is fading," she explained. "Their legacy lives on through me, but it's not enough to hold back the Voidborn forever. The galaxy must awaken to the threat. It must unite, not just to rebuild the seal, but to face the darkness together." Kale's brow furrowed as he processed her words. "So, what do we do? Go back to Earth and try to convince everyone that an ancient evil is about to destroy the galaxy?" "They'll think we're crazy." Zainara's gaze softened, a faint smile touching her lips. "They'll listen," she said, "because of you, because of what you've seen, what you've faced. You carry the truth now, and truth has a way of cutting through even the thickest veil of doubt." The weight of her words settled over the crew, the realization of what lay ahead dawning on them. But before they could respond, the ship's systems began to flicker, the faint hum of the engines faltering. Zainara stood, her form glowing brighter as she stepped toward the console. "What are you doing?" Kale asked, his voice tinged with alarm. "The Aetheris won't make it back to Earth without help," she replied, her tone resolute. "The Voidborn's influence damaged its systems too deeply, but I can give it the energy it needs. One last gift from the Celestials." Lyra struggled to sit up, her voice trembling with desperation. "No, Zainara, there has to be another way." But Zainara's decision was made. Her form began to dissolve, golden light streaming from her body and into the ship's systems. The flickering light steadied, the hum of the engines growing stronger as her essence infused the Aetheris with newfound strength. "This is my purpose," she said, her voice fading as her body became pure light. "To ensure you return, to ensure the galaxy has a chance. Tell them what you've seen, what you fought for." And with that, she was gone, her light merging with the ship itself. The crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of her sacrifice pressing down on them like a star, collapsing in on itself. Kale was the first to move, his hands gripping the controls as he set a course for Earth. His jaw was set, his eyes hard with determination. "We'll make it count," he said, his voice low but fierce. "We'll make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain." Lyra leaned back, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. She stared at the stars outside the viewport, their light a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy they now had to protect. She showed us the way, she said softly. Now it's up to us to follow it. As the Aetheris sped toward Earth, the crew prepared for the next chapter of their journey. They had faced the Voidborn and survived, but the fight was far from over. The galaxy's fate rested in their hands, and the echoes of Zainara's sacrifice would guide them forward. Together, they would carry the Celestials' legacy, not just as explorers, but as guardians of a future that depended on their courage and unity. The Aetheris cut through the void, its engines humming steadily as the crew began the long journey back to Earth. The ship bore the scars of their harrowing mission, singed panels, flickering lights, and a faint golden glow that seemed to linger in its walls, a quiet reminder of Zainara's sacrifice. Lyra sat in the command center, her gaze fixed on the stars outside, her mind heavy with the weight of all they had endured. "We've come so far," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "But it's not over, not yet." Kale, once the skeptic of the group, now stood beside her, his arms crossed and his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy," he said, his tone softer than usual. "But seeing it, feeling it changes things. The Voidborn isn't just some abstract threat. It's real, and if we don't do something, it's going to destroy everything." Lyra nodded, her eyes still on the stars. "We have to make sure Zainara's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The galaxy needs to know what's coming, but convincing them that's going to be the hard part." Before Kale could respond, the ship's proximity alarms blared, snapping them both to attention. On the viewport, a cluster of ships appeared, their sleek, angular designs unlike anything the crew had seen before. The alien fleet moved with precision, surrounding the Aetheris in a tight formation. "Well, this is new," Kale muttered, his hands flying over the controls. "They're hailing us. Should I open a channel?" Lyra straightened, her weariness replaced by a sharp focus. "Do it." The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure clad in shimmering armor, their face obscured by a helmet that reflected the light of the stars. The alien's voice was deep and resonant, their words translated through the ship's systems. "You carry a powerful energy signature," they said, their tone accusatory. "Explain yourselves or be prepared to face the consequences." Lyra stepped forward, her posture calm but authoritative. "We're explorers from Earth," she began, her voice steady. "The energy you're detecting comes from a shard we used to stabilize a seal, holding back a great threat. A force called the Voidborn. It's a danger to all of us, and we need your help to stop it." The alien commander's helmet tilted slightly, their skepticism evident even through the distortion. "The Voidborn, a creature of myth and legend. You expect us to believe such tales?" Kale bristled at the dismissive tone, but Lyra held up a hand, silencing him. "It's not a tale," she said, her voice firm. "We've seen it, fought it. And if we don't act, it will break free and consume everything. Your worlds, your people, everything you hold dear." The alien commander remained silent for a moment, their gaze unwavering. "Prove it," they said finally. "Show us evidence of this threat, or we will consider your words nothing more than the ramblings of desperate wanderers." Lyra exchanged a glance with Kale, her mind racing. The shard was gone, its energy spent, but Zainara's sacrifice had left a mark, not just on the Aetheris, but on them. She reached for the console, pulling up the ship's logs and transmitting the data they had collected during their journey. Images of the crumbling seal, the Voidborn's shadowy influence, and the Celestial's final moments flooded the screen. "This is what we faced," Lyra said, her voice tinged with urgency. "This is what's coming. We're not asking you to take our word for it. We're asking you to see the truth for yourself." The alien commander studied the data, their silence stretching into an eternity. Finally, they spoke, their tone less hostile, but still guarded. "If what you say is true, then the danger is greater than we imagined. But trust is not easily given. We will escort you to our homeworld, where our leaders will decide your fate." Lyra's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the tension in the room remained. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "We're not your enemies, we're trying to save all of us." As the alien fleet fell into formation around the Aetheris, Kale leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Well, that went better than I expected," he said dryly, "but something tells me this is just the beginning." Lyra nodded, her gaze returning to the stars. "It is, but if we can convince them, we might just have a chance. The galaxy needs to unite, and if it starts here, then we've taken the first step." The Aetheris followed the alien ships, its crew exhausted but resolute. The journey ahead would test their resolve in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was certain: the fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun. The alien fleet escorted the Aetheris through the void, their sleek ships gliding effortlessly alongside the battered human vessel. Inside, Lyra and Kale prepared for the next challenge, convincing the aliens' leaders that the Voidborn was more than just a myth. The tension in the air was palpable, but Lyra's resolve remained unshaken. She had faced the Voidborn's shadow and emerged with the truth now. She had to make others see it too. As the fleet approached the alien homeworld, its surface came into view, a sprawling expanse of shimmering cities and towering spires, their architecture both elegant and alien. The Aetheris was directed to a massive docking platform, where a delegation awaited them. The aliens' leaders, clad in flowing robes adorned with intricate patterns, exuded an air of authority and skepticism. Lyra stepped forward, her posture calm but confident. "Thank you for allowing us to speak with you," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We know our claims sound unbelievable, but the evidence we carry is irrefutable. The Voidborn is real, and it threatens all of us." The alien leaders exchanged glances, their expressions inscrutable. One of them, a tall figure with eyes that glowed faintly, stepped forward. "We have reviewed your data," they said, their voice measured. "While it is compelling, we must consider the possibility that you have misinterpreted what you witnessed. The Voidborn is a legend, a tale told to caution our young against the dangers of hubris." Kale, standing beside Lyra, couldn't contain his frustration. "We're not here to debate mythology," he interjected, his tone sharp but controlled. "We've seen what the Voidborn can do. It's not just a story. It's a force that consumes everything in its path. If we don't act, it'll destroy your worlds, just like it almost destroyed ours." The alien leader's gaze shifted to Kale, their expression unreadable. "Your passion is noted," they said, their tone cool. "But passion alone does not prove truth. If we are to risk our resources and our people, we require more than words." Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Then let us show you more." She activated the ship's holographic display, projecting the Celestial's records into the air. Images of the ancient war against the Voidborn filled the space. Massive battles, the Celestial's radiant forms clashing with the shadowy entity, and the final, desperate act of sealing it away. The alien leaders watched in silence, their skepticism giving way to a growing unease. When the display ended, the chamber was eerily quiet. Finally, the tall leader spoke again, their voice softer now. "These records, they are genuine." Lyra nodded. "They are. The Celestials sacrificed everything to protect the galaxy. Now, it's up to us to carry on their legacy." "The Voidborn is waking, and if we don't unite, it will consume us all." The alien leaders conferred briefly, their voices low and urgent. After what felt like an eternity, the tall leader turned back to Lyra. "We will form an alliance," they said, their tone solemn. "But know this, trust is fragile, and the path ahead will not be easy. We will need more than promises to rally the galaxy against this threat." Relief washed over Lyra, but it was short-lived. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders. "We understand," she said, her voice steady. "And we're ready to do whatever it takes." As the Aetheris left the alien homeworld, its crew was filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. The alliance was a crucial first step, but the road ahead was long and uncertain. Kale broke the silence, his tone lighter than usual. "Well, that went better than I expected, but something tells me Earth's leaders aren't going to be any easier to convince." Lyra managed a small smile, though her thoughts were already racing ahead. "We'll find a way," she said. "We have to." When the Aetheris finally returned to Earth, the crew was greeted with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The world they had left behind seemed unchanged, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the danger lurking at the edge of the galaxy. Lyra's reputation as a visionary grew as she shared their findings, but the weight of responsibility bore down on her more than ever. She had seen the Voidborn's darkness, felt its hunger, and now the fate of the galaxy rested on her ability to make others see it too. Not everyone was willing to believe. Skeptics dismissed their claims as fear-mongering, while others demanded more proof than the Celestials' records could provide. But Lyra and her crew pressed on, rallying support wherever they could. They knew the truth, and they knew what was at stake. As they prepared to address the leaders of Earth, Lyra felt a quiet determination settle over her. The journey had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also shown them the strength they carried within. The fight against the Voidborn was far from over, but with each step, they were building a future worth fighting for. And in the heart of the unknown, that future was closer than ever. The halls of Earth's Grand Council chamber were filled with a tense, buzzing energy as Lyra and Kale stepped forward to address the planet's most powerful leaders. The weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders, but they carried themselves with the quiet confidence of those who had stared into the abyss and returned to tell the tale. Behind them, holographic projections of the Celestials' records and the Voidborn's ominous shadow flickered to life. casting an eerie glow over the room. The threat we face is not one of ideology or borders, Lyra began, her voice steady but impassioned. It is a force that transcends our understanding, a darkness that seeks to consume everything in its path. The Voidborn is real, and it is coming. If we do not unite, if we do not prepare, it will destroy us all. For a moment, the room was silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. But then, the murmurs began quiet at first, but growing louder as the leaders exchanged skeptical glances. One of them, a high-ranking official from a powerful nation, leaned forward, his expression dismissive. "This sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "How can we be expected to divert resources to fight a threat that none of us can see?" Kale stepped forward, his frustration barely contained. "You don't have to see it to believe it," he countered, his voice sharp. "We've brought you proof records from a civilization that fell trying to stop this thing. Do you really want to wait until it's on your doorstep before you act?" But the skepticism only deepened. Some leaders saw the Voidborn as a convenient scapegoat, a way to rally their people and consolidate power. Others dismissed it outright, claiming it was a fabrication designed to manipulate them. The political resistance was fierce, and Lyra's heart sank as she realized just how divided Earth truly was. As the debate raged on, Lyra felt the weight of despair creeping in. She had faced the Voidborn's shadow, felt its hunger, and survived its attacks. But convincing a room full of politicians who couldn't see beyond their own agendas felt like an impossible task. That night, as the crew regrouped, Kale broke the silence. "We're wasting our time with them," he said bluntly. "If the leaders won't listen, we'll go around them. There are people out there, scientists, engineers, explorers who will understand the threat. We can build our own coalition, one that's willing to fight for the galaxy's future." Lyra hesitated, her mind racing. The idea of bypassing Earth's governments was risky, but what other choice did they have? The Voidborn wouldn't wait for bureaucracy to catch up. "You're right," she said finally, her voice firm. "We'll reach out to those who are willing to listen, but we'll need more than just a handful of allies. We'll need a movement." And so, the crew began their recruitment efforts, reaching out to minds across the globe. They connected with scientists who had spent their lives studying the cosmos, engineers who dreamed of building the impossible, and explorers who had always yearned for the stars. Each conversation, each alliance, brought them one step closer to their goal. One of their first recruits was Dr. Amara Voss, a renowned astrophysicist who had long theorized about the existence of ancient civilizations. "I've spent my career searching for proof of what you're describing," she said, her eyes alight with excitement. "To think that it's been here all along, we can't waste this opportunity." Another ally was Captain Elias Wren, a former military strategist who had turned to exploration after growing disillusioned with Earth's endless conflicts. "I've seen what happens when people let fear and division rule them," he said grimly, "but I've also seen what happens when they come together. If you're serious about this, count me in." As the coalition grew, so did their momentum. They began laying the groundwork for a galactic defense, pooling their resources and knowledge to prepare for the fight ahead. But the challenges were far from over. Earth's governments, wary of their growing influence, began to push back, labeling them as rogue elements and threatening sanctions. Lyra's resolve was tested more than ever. The weight of leadership, the constant pushback, and the enormity of the task ahead threatened to overwhelm her. But in those moments of doubt, she reminded herself of what was at stake, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. Kale, ever the pragmatist, kept the crew focused. "We're building something bigger than any one government," he said, his tone unwavering. "And when the Voidborn comes, they'll see the truth. Until then, we keep moving forward." The crew's efforts were a testament to the power of unity, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there were those who would rise to the challenge. The road ahead was uncertain, but with each new ally, each new step, they were laying the foundation for a future worth fighting for. And in the heart of that uncertainty, they found their strength. The coalition's ranks swelled with each passing week, a patchwork of scientists, engineers, explorers, and visionaries united by a shared purpose. Yet as their numbers grew, so did the cracks in their fragile alliance. The very unity Lyra had fought so hard to build was now being tested by competing agendas and clashing egos. In the heart of their makeshift headquarters, a sprawling complex repurposed from an abandoned spaceport, tension simmered just beneath the surface. At the center of the storm was Dr. Amara Voss, whose brilliance was matched only by her ambition. She saw the Celestials' technology not just as a tool to fight the Voidborn, but as a gateway to a new era of human advancement. "Imagine what we could achieve," she argued during one heated council meeting, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "We could reshape our civilization, transcend our limitations. Why limit ourselves to survival when we could thrive?" Captain Elias Wren, ever the pragmatist, countered with a sharp edge to his voice. "This isn't about thriving, it's about surviving." The Voidborn doesn't care about our dreams. If we lose focus, we lose everything. Lyra stood between them, her presence a calming force amid the rising tempers. "We can't afford to divide ourselves," she said, her voice steady but firm. "The Celestials' technology is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. We use it to protect, not to exploit. That's the only way we'll stand a chance." But not everyone shared her vision. Factions began to form, each with its own agenda. Some sought to weaponize the Celestials' technology, believing that only overwhelming force could stop the Voidborn. Others pushed for secrecy, arguing that sharing their discoveries would only invite chaos. The coalition, once a beacon of hope, was now a fragile alliance held together by little more than Lyra's determination. Amid the turmoil, Kale stepped into a new role, his technical expertise becoming the coalition's lifeline. While others debated, he worked tirelessly to secure their resources, ensuring that their ships were operational, their defenses fortified, and their supply chains intact. His no-nonsense approach earned him the respect of many, but it also put him at odds with those who saw his pragmatism as a threat to their ambitions. "We're running out of time," Kale muttered one evening as he and Lyra reviewed their dwindling supplies. "If we don't get our act together, the Voidborn won't need to lift a finger. We'll tear ourselves apart before it even gets here." Lyra sighed, her exhaustion evident. "I know, but unity isn't something you can force. It has to come from trust, from a shared purpose. And right now, that's in short supply. As if to underscore her words, strange phenomena began to occur on Earth. Unexplained power outages, erratic weather patterns, and reports of shadowy figures seen in the corners of people's vision. At first, they were dismissed as coincidences, the byproducts of a stressed and overburdened world. But Lyra knew better. She had seen the Voidborn's influence firsthand, and these disturbances bore its unmistakable mark. "It's testing us," she said during a late-night briefing, her voice heavy with urgency. "Its influence is spreading, probing for weaknesses. If we don't act soon, Earth will be its next target." The realization forced her to confront a painful choice. Should she focus her efforts on protecting Earth, fortifying their defenses, and rallying their allies? Or should she take the fight to the Voidborn, launching a desperate mission to confront it before its power grew too great? Kale leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Either way, we're gambling with the galaxy's future. But if we wait too long, we might not get another shot." Lyra's thoughts raced as she weighed her options. The coalition was fragile, Earth was vulnerable, and time was running out. She knew that whatever decision she made would define not just her legacy, but the fate of countless lives. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Lyra made her choice. "We can't wait any longer," she said, her voice resolute. "We take the fight to the Voidborn. But we do it together, not as factions, not as rivals, but as one. Because if we're divided, we've already lost." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a heavy blanket. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, but in the face of the Voidborn's encroaching darkness, it was the only choice that offered a glimmer of hope. The coalition, fractured but not yet broken, prepared for the next phase of their journey. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. But in the heart of that uncertainty, Lyra found a quiet strength. The fight for the galaxy's future was far from over, and she was determined to see it through no matter the cost. The Coalition's headquarters buzzed with activity as Lyra finalized preparations for the mission. The newly designed ship, christened Astrea, stood gleaming in the hangar, its sleek hull embedded with celestial technology that pulsed faintly with golden light. This wasn't just a vessel, it was a symbol of hope, a fusion of human ingenuity and the Celestial's ancient wisdom. Yet as Lyra stood before it, her thoughts were heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. "This is it," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mix of resolve and regret. "We've come so far, but the hardest part is still ahead of us." Kale stepped up beside her, his usual gruff demeanor softened by the gravity of the moment. "We've got the best ship, the best team, and the best plan we could come up with. That's more than most people get when they're staring down the end of the galaxy." The team Lyra had chosen was small but formidable. Dr. Amara Voss, whose expertise in celestial technology was unmatched, would serve as their lead scientist. Captain Elias Wren, with his tactical brilliance and unshakable resolve, would oversee their strategy, and Kale, of course, would keep the Astrea running, no matter what the Voidborn threw at them. Together, they represented the Coalition's best chance at success, and its greatest vulnerability. As the crew boarded the ship, Lyra took a moment to look back at the faces gathered in the hangar. These were the people who had believed in her vision, who had risked everything to stand against a threat they could barely comprehend. The sacrifices they had made Zainara's ultimate sacrifice, the lives lost in the early skirmishes, the countless hours poured into preparing for this moment. All of it weighed on her. But it also gave her strength. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," she said, addressing the crew one last time before departure. "We're fighting for every world, every life, every future." The Voidborn doesn't care about borders or alliances. It only knows hunger, and if we don't stop it, it will consume everything, but we will stop it. Because we have to. The Astrea launched into the void, its engines humming with a quiet power that belied the chaos waiting at the edge of the galaxy. The journey was long and fraught with tension, the crew's nerves fraying as the Voidborn's influence grew stronger with each passing light year. Strange distortions rippled across the ship's sensors, and the stars outside seemed to dim, as though the Voidborn's shadow was swallowing their light. Dr. Voss worked tirelessly, her hands flying over the console as she monitored the celestial technology. "The closer we get, the more unstable the readings become," she reported, her voice tinged with unease. "It's like the Voidborn is trying to push us back, to keep us from reaching the seal." Captain Wren, ever the strategist, kept a close eye on their trajectory. "We'll need to be ready for anything," he said, his tone grim. "If the Voidborn knows we're coming, it won't hold back." Kale, meanwhile, focused on keeping the Astrea operational, his hands steady even as the ship's systems began to falter under the strain. "We're holding together," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "But we're running on borrowed time." As they neared the edge of the galaxy, the Voidborn's presence became impossible to ignore. The darkness outside the viewport seemed alive, writhing and shifting as though it were watching them. The crew's fears, once buried deep, began to surface, manifesting as whispers and shadows that lurked in the corners of their vision. Lyra stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The seal was close now, its faint glow barely visible through the Voidborn's oppressive shadow. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her, but she also felt something else, a quiet determination, a fire that refused to be extinguished. "This is what we've been preparing for," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "The Voidborn will try to break us, but we're stronger than it thinks. We've faced the darkness before, and we'll face it again, together." The crew braced themselves as the Astrea approached the seal, its golden light flickering like a dying star. The Voidborn's shadow surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness threatening to engulf them, but Lyra held her ground, her hand tightening on the controls. "Prepare for impact," she said, her voice steady. "This is where we make our stand." The Astrea plunged into the heart of the storm, its crew united against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The battle for the future had begun, and failure was not an option. The Astrea plunged into the heart of the Voidborn's shadow, its hull groaning under the strain of the encroaching darkness. Outside, the stars had vanished, swallowed by a void so deep and consuming that it felt as though the universe itself had turned against them. Inside the ship, the crew braced themselves, their faces illuminated by the faint golden glow of the celestial technology embedded in the walls. Lyra stood at the helm, her hands steady on the controls despite the chaos unfolding around her. "We're here," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is where we make our stand." The seal loomed ahead, its once radiant surface now cracked and flickering, barely holding against the Voidborn's relentless assault. Tendrils of shadow lashed out, writhing and twisting as they sought to break through the weakening barrier. The sight was both awe-inspiring and horrifying, a testament to the Celestial's power and the Voidborn's unyielding hunger. Dr. Voss worked frantically at her console, her fingers flying over the interface as she tried to stabilize the ship's systems. "The seal's failing," she reported, her voice tight with urgency. "If we don't reinforce it now, it'll collapse completely." Captain Wren stepped forward, his tactical mind already calculating their next move. "We need to buy time," he said, his tone grim. "The Voidborn will throw everything it has at us, but we can't let it break through." Kale, his hands gripping the engineering controls, nodded in agreement. "The ship's holding, but barely. If we push too hard, we risk losing everything." Lyra's gaze never wavered from the seal. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the remnants of the crystal shard. Its light was faint, barely a flicker, but it was enough. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "The shard's the key. We use it to reinforce the seal, and we push the Voidborn back, once and for all." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of her words sinking in. They had come so far, faced so much, but this was the moment that would define them. The Voidborn, sensing their presence, shifted its focus, its shadowy tendrils coiling and writhing as it prepared to strike. As the crew worked to channel the shard's energy into the seal, the Voidborn attacked. Its form shifted, taking on a shape that seemed to defy comprehension, a swirling mass of darkness that pulsed with an otherworldly malice. But as it drew closer, its true nature became clear. It wasn't just a physical force, it was a manifestation of their deepest fears and regrets. For Kale, it was the Astrea crumbling around him, his inability to save it a reflection of his own insecurities. For Dr. Voss, it was the weight of her ambition, the fear that her thirst for knowledge had led them to ruin. For Captain Wren, it was the faces of those he had failed to protect, their voices accusing him of weakness. Lyra, however, stood firm. She had faced the Voidborn's shadow before, felt its hunger, and survived its attacks. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just her life on the line. It was the galaxy's. She closed her eyes, focusing on the shard's faint glow. "I know what you are," she whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "And I'm not afraid." The Voidborn's shadow surged forward, its tendrils reaching for her. But at the last moment, Lyra channeled the shard's energy, its light flaring brightly as it merged with the seal. The golden barrier flared to life, its cracks sealing one by one as the Voidborn's shadow recoiled. But the cost was high. The shard's energy wasn't just a tool, it was a part of her. As she poured the last of her strength into the seal, she felt her own life force draining away. Kale's voice cut through the chaos, filled with desperation. "Lyra, what are you doing? Stop." But it was too late. The seal flared brightly, its light pushing the Voidborn back into the void. The Astrea was thrown clear, its systems flickering as the crew struggled to regain control. When the light faded, Lyra was gone. The crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of her sacrifice pressing down on them like a collapsing star. The seal held, its golden light a beacon of hope in the darkness. But the cost was immeasurable. Kale sank to his knees, his hands gripping the console as though it could anchor him to reality. Dr. Voss stared at the place where Lyra had stood, her expression a mix of grief and awe. Captain Wren, ever the stoic leader, bowed his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "She saved us," he said, his tone heavy with emotion. "She saved all of us." The Astrea drifted in the void, its crew united in their grief, but also in their resolve. The seal held, the Voidborn's shadow pushed back for now. But the fight wasn't over. The galaxy was safe, but it was also forever changed. And in the heart of that change, Lyra's legacy would live on, a testament to the power of courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding human spirit. The journey had come to an end, but the story was far from over, and as the crew prepared to return to Earth, they knew one thing for certain: Lyra's sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy would remember her, and the fight for its future would continue. Because in the end, that's what heroes do. They light the way, even when the darkness seems endless. The Astrea emerged from hyperspace, its hull scarred but intact, as the crew returned to Earth. The planet's blue-green glow filled the viewport, a stark contrast to the darkness they had left behind. Yet, the joy of their return was overshadowed by the absence of Lyra. Her sacrifice had saved the galaxy, but the weight of her loss hung heavy over the crew. Kale stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls with a quiet intensity. He had always been the practical one, the engineer who kept the ship running and the mission on track. But now, he carried a new burden, one that went beyond repairs and calculations. Lyra's vision, her determination to unite the galaxy against the Voidborn, had become his responsibility. "She believed in us," he said, his voice low but steady as the crew gathered in the command center. "She believed we could do this, not just fight the Voidborn, but build something better. I'm not going to let that belief die with her." The crew nodded, their grief mingling with a renewed sense of purpose. Dr. Voss, her usual fiery ambition, tempered by the weight of their loss, stepped forward. "Lyra showed us what we're capable of," she said, her voice firm. "We owe it to her, and to the galaxy, to keep going." Captain Wren, ever the strategist, added his voice to the chorus. "The Voidborn may be pushed back for now, but it's not gone. We need to prepare, to build alliances, to make sure we're ready when it returns." As the Astrea touched down on Earth, the crew was greeted as heroes. Crowds gathered to celebrate their return, their faces filled with awe and admiration. But for Kale and the others, the cheers felt hollow. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the coalition grew stronger. Kale, stepping into Lyra's role, worked tirelessly to unite humanity and its newfound allies. The Celestials' technology, once a source of division, became a symbol of hope, a bridge between worlds and civilizations. Zainara's sacrifice was honored, her name spoken with reverence in the halls of the Coalition's headquarters. Her connection to the Celestials had been a guiding light, and her legacy lived on in the efforts to prepare the galaxy for the Voidborn's eventual return. The story of the Astrea and its crew became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, there were those who would rise to the challenge. The hidden realms of the Milky Way, once a source of fear and mystery, now held a new promise, a promise of discovery, unity, and the unyielding spirit of exploration. As Kale stood before a gathering of Earth's leaders, his voice carried the weight of everything they had fought for. "We've faced the Voidborn," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "We've seen what it can do, but we've also seen what we can do when we stand together. The galaxy is full of wonders and dangers, but it's also full of hope. And as long as we hold on to that hope, we'll be ready for whatever comes next." The room erupted in applause, but Kale's thoughts were already turning to the future. The fight against the Voidborn was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Humanity and its allies were stronger together, and the galaxy's greatest adventures were still ahead. As the Astrea prepared for its next mission, Kale looked out at the stars, their light a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the endless possibilities it held. The journey had changed them all, but it had also shown them what they were capable of, and in the heart of the unknown, that knowledge was their greatest strength. The story of the Astrea was just one chapter in the galaxy's history, but it was a chapter that would be remembered, because in the end, it wasn't just about fighting the darkness. It was about finding the light within themselves and each other. And that light would guide them forward, no matter what challenges lay ahead.